I'm Patrick Cusick. I'm the Deputy Commissioner for the Cleveland Department of Public Health, Division of Environment, and I'd like to welcome you to the lead poisoning education event. What we're here for is to give you some background on the programs and then actually connect you with resources in the community. We have many of our community partners here: Cleveland Metropolitan School District, Ohio Department of Health, Help Me Grow, Cleveland Tenants Organization, Centers for Families and Children Services, Community Development, Division of Water, Ohio Department of Health, and the Cleveland Department of Public Health, and our Moms First program, and the Office of Minority Health, and our center, our health centers director is here as well, and Lutheran Metropolitan Ministry. So I'd like to, at this point, invite our Chief of Public Affairs, Natoya Walker-Minor. Environmental Health Watch, University Hospitals, Rainbow Babies and Children. So we have a lot of folks in the room to help connect you with resources and give you some more information about lead poisoning prevention. And at this time, I'd like to invite our Chief of Public Affairs, Natoya Walker-Minor, who covers a wide range of areas.
So good afternoon. We are so excited to see all of you that brought your children here today. In the city of Cleveland, we've been dealing with lead from the perspective of what can we do better in the health department. But the reality is that the city of Cleveland, with a housing stock of arguably between 80 to 85% built before 1979, the majority, overwhelming majority of our housing stock has lead in it. And what that means is that our children, come on in. What that means is that our children are at risk. Our children are at risk, and we have to maintain our homes better. Housing maintenance is key. So you will hear some things from Dr. Door Dearborn about that. But we're here really to talk about our children that are at risk. And because some of our children have been exposed to lead because of lack of maintenance in our homes, they're at risk for cognitive challenges. They're at risk for behavioral challenges. We need to protect our babies. We need to protect our children. Your names came to us because we know that your children have tested positive for an elevated blood lead level. And there are things that we can do to curb this. There are things that we could do to help manage our children, to make sure they get the support services they need, to make sure that they get the nutrition that they need, to make sure that our children have an opportunity and a future as a contributing adult in our community. And that's what we want to do. That's why we invited you here. We want to take a look at, we want to ask you, we want to engage you to see if the lead that is in your children's bloodstreams is in your present house, is it in your former house, and what can be done. We have our partner here from Community Development here. They have some grant dollars. What that means is there are dollars available to remediate. What that means is dollars available to make your home safe for your children. And so I'm delighted to be here. I'm delighted that all our partners are here because we want to take care of our children. We have always wanted to take care of our children, and we're reaching out to you to ask you to join us as we discuss ideas, strategies, ways that we can make sure that our children are healthy, that we maintain some of the challenges, some of the behavioral and cognitive challenges that you may see in the household, that you may have heard from their teachers in the schools. So we want you to ask questions. We want you to listen, learn. We want you to know that we are here to partner with you to make sure that our children are safe. So at this time, I want to take a moment before I introduce Dr. Dearborn, and I want to invite up here to say a few words the new director of the Cleveland Department of Public Health. On Monday, we swore in a new director of the Cleveland Department of Public Health. Her name is Meryl Gordon, and I'll ask her to come up and say a few words today.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. Yes, so I'm on my third day, and I'm really excited to be here tonight. Really, what we're trying to do, as Chief Walker Minor indicated, is to really give you a lot of resources and information of what you can do. The situation with lead is huge. Most of our houses, as she mentioned, were built and painted before 1979, and it's everywhere. So our work and our goal is to try to make our communities as healthy as possible, and to try to make sure that our health department is responding in the way that we can to make our communities healthier for you guys and for your children and for the next generations to come. So we really want to thank you for being here tonight. We know it's a beautiful night in Cleveland, but you're here because it's important. It's important to us to be here and provide these resources for you. So please take advantage of them, and we look forward to hearing the presentation tonight. I also want to thank all of our partners for being here and being a resource to our community and working with us. So thank you very much.
At this time, I want to invite up Dr. Door Dearborn. We are very fortunate here in Cleveland that we have a national expert that has dedicated a tremendous part of his career, professionally and academically, to lead, talking about it, and we're going to learn from him today what is lead. What are some of the signs that you see, and what are some of the things that you can do to protect your children? At this time, I'd like to introduce Dr. Door Dearborn.
Thank you, Natalia. And welcome, Director Gordon. Yes, we look forward to working with you. So, the bottom line for this whole thing is children. I'm glad that there are a bunch of them here. That's what this is all about. So let's take a quick trip overview about lead and what can be done about it and what the problems are. So this is what I'm going to walk through for the top. Let me turn this a little bit. Okay, so we're going to cover basically what lead is, what the health impact of lead is on children and pregnant women, what can be done after a child is identified as having elevated blood lead. I'm sorry. I'll be better and stand behind the mic. Okay, and then what we can do to help these children. So this is the chemical symbol for lead. And you notice that I point out that it is similar to calcium. Both of them are two plus marks. They're both charged the same, and as you will see through the talk, in our bodies, lead follows calcium. So when calcium gets absorbed from the GI tract, the lead is also being absorbed. Maybe not fully off. There we go. Okay. Thank you. So it's a metal. It's easily refined and mined. It's very soft, very malleable. You can twist it into different forms. And it's had many uses. In ancient times, all the cooking pots and the plumbing and even the jewelry were used. It was kind of like their plastic. It was so easily obtained and put together. And in fact, they didn't have sugar in those days. What they did rather was to take grape juice and put it in lead pots and boil it down to a very high concentrate. And lead got into it and it made it sweet. So that's what they used instead of sugar. And they added it to not only their foods, but they added it to their wine. And some historians think that that's the reason the Roman Empire failed, is because of all the lead throughout their thing. But moving on to more modern times, until 1978, 79, it was included in residential house paint. And about that time also it was taken out of gasoline. Before that time, and we still have residual plumbing service lines to our houses, it's still very heavily used in batteries. And unfortunately, toys usually that come from outside the country, because they're lead in toys in the United States is not legal. So what are the impacts on children's health from this? The IQ, the intelligence is decreased. They have difficulty in memory, sound processing. Visual motor, that means they can't hit a baseball as well. And language development. They tend to be hyperactive. And all this leads then commonly to school failure, a lower graduation rate. And also come along with this is a tendency to poorly control their emotions, to be aggressive. And this then comes through with antisocial behaviors. For some reason, boys are more heavily affected than girls. And the severity of all of these is very dependent upon the level of lead in the blood. At very low levels, these are hardly noticeable, but at much higher levels, they're very prevalent. So this then is a graph that shows different levels of lead and IQ scores. And if you look at the red line, you see that as you increase the lead levels, the IQ testing goes down. But notice that there's no threshold, that is continuous. And actually, down at very low levels, there's still a decrease in IQ. And that's why we say there's no safe level of lead. That lead, even at low levels, can impact intelligence. But that's not the only important thing. There's a part of the brain that controls our planning and what we do from minute to minute, our attention level, our degree of activity, and what we respond to with anger and impulses. Psychologists call this executive function. And this is in the front part of the brain, and that's shown to be decreased, particularly in boys that have had lead poisoning. But the antisocial behavior and aggressive behavior come along with this. Now there's a group in Cincinnati, University of Cincinnati, that have followed lead poisoned children for now 25, 30 years. And when they look at these 200 or 300 children now as they are young adults and look at what their arrest rates are, you see that over half of the males have been arrested at least once after they were 18 years old. And the females are much less affected by this. So what do we do about this? When we know that a child has elevated lead levels, what is our approach to what we can help them with? Well, the major thing, of course, is to stop the lead exposure. And that's what the health department's all about with their programs. But we also need to retest to see that their levels aren't getting higher. And we've recognized recently that we need to attend to their early childhood learning. And I'll come back to that. So this is what one does in response to various lead levels. There's a handout over there that has all this information and more on it. So you can see that if the public health level of 5 is kind of a level of concern. So if the level is less than 5, then you still need to be tested every year until you're about 6 years old. By Medicaid law, federal and state, you're required to have lead tests at 1 and 2 years of age. Our experience here in Cleveland is that it needs to be extended to 3, 4, and 5. So our recommendations are that the child gets tested every year. If it's above 5, then the child needs to be followed fairly often to make sure that it's going down and not up. And it also is a signal that if there are other children in the home environment, that they also need to be tested and followed. In the range from 10 to 19, then the testing frequency is even more frequently, as it is over 20, goes from months to weeks. But if it's 45 or over, that is a medical emergency. That child must see the doctor that day and be put in the hospital and receive special treatment, both orally and intravenously, to decrease the lead level, because it's at this level of 45 and above that you start seeing seizures and other problems with brain activity and the gastrointestinal tract. And so this is, again, a medical emergency and needs to be addressed as quickly as possible. And after the treatment is over, there's always a rebound in the level. And so 3 or 4 weeks later, the level needs to be repeated, because the treatment may need to be repeated. So what about early childhood learning? We used to think that the damage from lead poisoning to the brain was irreversible. And in some ways it is. On the other hand, what that ignores is the reserve and the flexibility of particularly the young mind. So last year, about a year ago, CDC put out an expert panel report pointing out that we need to include these children in special education programs in early childhood. And so recognizing that the brain can compensate. Now, most of you have had some experience with elderly people that have had a stroke. And you're probably aware that for the first few days after that stroke, that person may not be able to speak, may not be able to walk, may not be able to control their arms or their legs. But they're put into special treatment programs, and 6 months later, most of them are be able to talk and be able to walk. Well, if the old brain can get repaired, so can the young brain. And that's the basic message. We need to help these children compensate. So, Help Me Grow, and their table is right over here. Any child with a lead level over 5 is to be referred to Help Me Grow. And what they can provide then is evaluation of the developmental status of the child, and include them in home parenting programs. Parents are not only the first teachers, they're the best teachers. And that's why the emphasis has got to be first on in the home. And there are 2 programs in the county that Help Me Grow can help you get included in. Bright Beginnings, which is a program for children less than 3, where people come out to the home and help the parents learn how to provide a special environment for developmentally delayed children. And then for children that are 4 and above, Spark is a local literacy program that was started out of Metro Hospital several years ago, and now it's a national program. And Spark is also a home parenting program, and Help Me Grow can graduate children from Bright Beginnings into Spark. So stop by their table and get the referral information as to how you can connect with them. Then also what Help Me Grow can do is to refer to high-quality early childhood centers. You may be aware that UPK, the Universal Pre-K Kindergarten Centers, that there are 35 of them throughout the county. And most of them are of what we consider high quality, and that you've got to make sure that your pre-kindergarten, your preschool age children are put into one of these programs that can give you a high quality experience and to help them grow better. Then when the children get into school, be sure to tell the school, but not just the school, specifically tell their teachers that your child has been lead poisoned and at what level, so they can help guide programs for your child. They can ask them for evaluations and proper placement. They may go into a regular classroom or they may need special education. Ask the teachers how you as a parent can help in this process and be involved with it. It's very important that you are the front line on that. So, how else can we protect children? I mentioned earlier about pregnancy in young infants. And as I said, lead follows calcium and is stored in the bone for long-term storage. So it can be in the bone for years to decades. Well, what happens during pregnancy is women who had early childhood lead exposure when they were young children, when they reach the age when they're starting to have babies, then we've got a problem, because like the calcium comes out of their bone to help the baby grow, so does the lead. So during the last 3 months of the pregnancy, the baby's size doubles, and a lot of that is bone growth. And that bone growth comes from calcium that is taken from the mother's bones, but along with it comes lead. Well, what we can do about that, and there is a study that was done a few years ago to show that if you add adequate calcium to the diet, not just the prenatal diet vitamins, because they have a little bit of calcium, but not enough. Actually, the simple thing is to take 2 Tums a day throughout the pregnancy. Then you're able to save the calcium coming out of the bone, and to have much less lead coming out of the bone with it. So this is something that the Cleveland Metropolitan School nurses know, and that they are teaching all of their health classes, and that all of any pregnant teenagers are told that they need to go on 2 Tums a day. Well, what about after the baby's born? Well, breast milk also gets calcium and from the mother's blood. So, again, there must be supplementation of the calcium, so that a breastfeeding mother should also take 2 Tums a day to supply the calcium rather than having it pulled out of the bone along with the lead. Formula-fed infants. I think I was guilty of this 50 years ago when I had young children, making formula from powder, of using the hot water tap to dissolve the powder, because it was hot and it would go into the powder. But no, hot water has more lead in it. If you want to use warm or hot water to make up your formula, take cold water and put it on the teapot and put it on the stove. So tap water, hot tap water, should not be used to make formula. So where does lead come from that we have to be worried about to try to decrease our exposures? I'm going to give you a quick overview, but there are people around the room, particularly Aqua Tyler from Environmental Health Watch, that can give you more specifics. And there's another flyer over the desk over there about what to do in your homes. So most of the problem in Cleveland, as Ms. Walker Minor pointed out, is lead in the paint dust and in flakes of paint. And what you need to do in your home, even if the health department is involved in remediating your home, and still, frequently mop the floors, but not with a dry mop, with a damp mop, so you don't put the lead dust in the air. And wash your windowsills and countertops and coffee tables with damp, soapy rag to trap the lead paint dust, and to get rid of it. Well, there's also lead in the soil outside your house. This comes from the air years ago when we had lead in gasoline. It came out of the air. It also comes from when your house was painted inappropriately on the outside and the scraped paint flakes were not captured and taken away, but were just allowed to go into the soil. By the way, doing it that way today is illegal. EPA has strict rules. If you're going to have remediation of your house by a professional, and your house is at risk for having lead paint, that is, it's older than 1979, it's required by law that firm that does your remediation be trained in special techniques as to how to protect the soil and the inside environment. Obviously, the bottom line, protect your children. So the way we handle this on a routine basis is that when you come in from the outside, you take your shoes off so you don't track it into the house. And then we need to wash our hands frequently, especially before eating, but even several times through the day, because if young children are playing with their toys on the floor, they're getting that paint dust on their hands. And hopefully they're keeping their hands out of their mouth, but we all know that particularly young toddlers like to put their fingers in their mouth. Let me raise another point. Also, children that are anemic, whether they're anemic from inadequate iron or whether they're sickle cell anemic, tend to have the hand-to-mouth activity longer. And so we've seen 4- and 5-year-old children with anemia who are lead poisoned, and that's the basis of this continued hand-to-mouth activity. So wash hands frequently. The water. Cook and drink only with cold water. Hot water is only for washing. It is not for drinking. It's not for cooking. Always use cold water for cooking. And there are 200,000 houses in the city of Cleveland with lead service pipes. This is what the Ohio EPA told me recently. That means that most of the houses have a lead pipe that brings the water from the street into the house. In addition, many of the houses had, when they switched over to copper piping, used lead-based solder. Lead was taken out of the solder not until the 80s. So between the lead service pipes and the lead solder, there is a source of lead to get into our water. Now, fortunately, we live in a community where the Cleveland Water Department, who are back there, have been following the EPA rules for years. And as far as we know, the water, even in our houses that have come through the lead pipes, is still safe. On the other hand, that's not absolutely certain, particularly on a house-by-house basis. So it's still good to follow these basic rules of using hot water only for cleaning, not for cooking or drinking. And finally then, work with your health department for your inspections and improvements. And they've got resources that they can help you make your house safe for your children. And again, that is the bottom line. Your children safe, and we can help them remain that way. So, the tables at least that you should visit, I didn't know all the tables around the room when I made this slide, but I've pointed out especially to get into the early childhood learning programs would help me grow, to talk to Tyler, to Aqua Tyler from Environmental Health Watch about other measures you can do in your house. And then there are also things from the Cleveland Water Department. But all of these tables here are great resources for you and your families to use to help with this major problem. Okay, are there questions? Akbar. Yes. So in addition to the lead service pipes into the house and the lead containing solder that was used until the late 80s, there still are brass fixtures, the joints and things in a lot, and the faucets in a lot of the houses. And brass contains lead. Again, underlining hot water for washing, cold water for eating. Yeah. Right, so, okay. Are there other questions that you might have? Anything we can? Yes. That's what we have observed. We don't fully know why, but when the Cincinnati group with the large cohort of now adults that were poisoned as young children, when they looked at the brains of their men versus their women, they found that the brains, particularly in the front part where the executive function part is, were more shrunken, were smaller than they were in the women. So it's strictly an observation, but we don't know scientifically why, although some researchers are in the process of trying to track that down and the other genes that are involved that are affected by the lead poisoning. Okay. So I realize that's only a partial answer, but that's all we have. Okay. Yes.
I had a client last year, and she rented a home. What's the rights of tenants when the landlord is saying he's working on it, getting it fixed, but they're still testing, everyone's tested positive in the home, but he's not following through, or you have a breach of communication?
That can be a complex problem that the folks that Cleveland Tennis Organization have attorneys that can help with that process. There are rules and regulations as to how that's supposed to proceed. That's one of the things that we're hoping to have improved in Cleveland is a rental registry that will identify the houses that are safe, so that if someone wants to rent a house, they can go to the registry and check an address and see whether that house is safe or not. That's one of the things that the health department and the law department and the Department of Development are working on to improve our rental registry in the city, to make that a better process. Okay.
If I could add to that one, also in community development, which is also represented in the rear of the room, we have a division of fair housing, so for housing discrimination and bullying and those types of things, and they have the staff that can investigate things like that. And in our Healthy Homes Area Department, all the departments working on this together, we can talk about those things that we do more. So, what your hands would be?
Yes, that's back at the red table.
To your question about how come more boys and girls, and this is anecdotal, but in our research and as we've been continuing to research this with many people, the lead dust, when it's low, when there's a report from one of Dr. Dearborn colleagues that came out about a month or so ago, Dr. Claudia Copeland, the dust blows, and so when the dust blows, and particularly boys are outside throwing the ball and things like that, taking the ball, so the dust is
I'm sorry, what was your question?
what does it look like?
Oh, well, lead dust from paint is so small you can't see it. But the flakes, the flakes that are coming off a house, you can see that. And you can see it whether it's still in the house or whether it's on the ground. I'm sorry? Okay, so Flint, Michigan, they did several things wrong. What they did is they switched from one water source to the Flint River. The Flint River was more corrosive, and so it helped peel the cover off of the lead pipes. But in addition, the Flint River was more heavily contaminated with bacteria. So they had to add more disinfectants. Those disinfectants break down to be corrosive and strip the pipes also. But the third thing, let me finish here because it's a big, the third thing is, by the EPA rules since 1991, you're supposed to add anti-corrosives, orthophosphate, to the water in the treatment plants. They didn't do that in Flint. And it's those three things that's why some of those folks are going to jail. Because they knew better. Because there was a similar problem in Washington, D.C. 15 years ago. And they found out that it was water from the lead pipes because of the corrosives and so on and so forth. That went to Congress. That is so widely known across the country, worldwide, that the engineers at Flint ignored that. No, lead if you would look at the bones from Indians 10,000 years ago in the United States, the lead level is 0. And that's the proper level, 0. Lead does nothing for any of our biological functions in our body. Now, if you look at Americans across the board today, the average lead level is about 1. Okay, that's because of the history that we've had, particularly with the lead paint and with the lead gasoline. That level is lower than when we usually see any problems, but still it's not normal. That's why we say there's no safe level of lead. Lead does nothing for the body. Okay? Yes.
I want to know how can you determine that boys outside playing more with girls and I don't know.
That's an explanation of perhaps what is seen with the...
Who comes to this conclusion?
That's what the thought might be as to why boys tend to have higher levels of lead. But it's not just the higher levels. The boy's brain is the boy's brain is more affected by the lead even at the same level as the girls. And that's what the studies have shown. Well, you can contact me and I'll send you a bunch of literature. Okay? There's scientific literature to say that that's the way it is. So the boys just seem to be more affected by it. That's what the scientific observations are. Yes? Okay. Well, like anything, like you want to make something more soluble, you want to dissolve something in water, the hotter the water, the easier it is to dissolve. The same way about the lead in the pipes. The hotter the water, the more lead it pulls out of the pipe. And in the hot water, between your hot water tank and your faucet, most likely it's copper piping, but in all the joints, most likely you have lead-based solder that put those joints together. And so the lead in that solder at all those joints is pulled out of that by hot water much better than cold water. So again, it's best to, when you're running your water, when you get up in the morning and turn your water on, let it run for 1 or 2 minutes to flush out the pipes. Or let it go till it gets as cold as it's going to get. That tells you that the lead that's been sitting, or the water that's been sitting in your pipes overnight, collecting lead because it's been sitting there for so long, that you've gotten rid of that you've flushed it down the drain. And that the fresher water coming through has not had the same length of time to sit there and extract the lead from the pipes. Okay. Yes. It is part of the profile that we have. Yes, I'm sorry I didn't list that. Good nutrition, as I've been pointing out, particularly calcium-containing foods like milk, and iron-containing foods like meats are, and along with other good nutrition things of vegetables and such, also a source of iron. Good nutrition helps, and it should be looked after also with these children. Yes, good point. Thanks for bringing that up. I'm sorry I forgot to mention it. Yes, Margaret? Yes, there are inner city gardens, and I would think that for the most part, the health departments have been good about monitoring those gardens. There's been lead in Cleveland soil for a long time. But most of those gardens are raised gardens with new soil, and they are protected. If they're not raised gardens and not new soil, then there might be some concern. But with all the increase, which is great, of the inner city gardens and inner city farming, there has been attention taken to making sure that you're not putting lead into the vegetables. Now, it doesn't take care of the garden in your backyard, and there's where the concern might be, that you should bring in soil from the outside that is lead-free. I'm sorry? Lead testing? I don't know about the plant. You could probably contact the state Ohio State University's Extension Service about the soil, because they have some people in Columbus who have been paying a lot of attention to this issue. Understand that. Great. Thank you for filling that in. Yes. Okay, I will hang around for a bit if you have additional questions. And the nurse for the lead program at Rainbow is Margaret Pesce. She's in the back. She's the one that reminded me to talk about gardens. So enjoy and take advantage of the resources. The bottom line are the children. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dearborn. A lot of great information. And as you listen to Dr. Dearborn talk about all of the different issues, he touched base on basically each one of our partners in the room, and that's why they're here. They're here to answer your very personal questions and your direct questions about it. We wanted to give a general overview. So most of the time tonight was supposed to be spent so that we can actually give you time to work with each one of the partners. In addition to the partners in the room, we also are doing testing for children under the age of 6 if they have the parent or guardian with them, and we can get your information. And the health mobile is outside to do the actual blood testing. 6 is the magic number for a couple of reasons. Children's brains develop very quickly at the earlier ages, and by the time they're 6, most of their neural development has settled in. So the earlier ages, especially the under 3, the toddlers that are doing a lot of hand-to-mouth and crawling on the floor, it's really important for them to be tested frequently. By the time kids get into the school age range, we're more looking at how do we reach the children who may have been impacted by lead, and working with the schools and Help Me Grow to make sure that we can give them ways to cope and address how to still reach their potential. So that's where lead poisoning is a continuum of screening and testing and prevention. We really want to work on prevention and education to prevent any child from being poisoned. So that's our core goal. The health department gets involved after a child gets tested and has a lead level of concern. So we're doing lead screening for kids under the age of 6 today if there's a parent here. In addition, did any of you receive a letter inviting you here indicating that your child had a prior lead screening? So over the past number of years, we've had parents that we weren't able to get in touch with. That's one of the reasons we're having these events, is to try and reach some of those parents as well, to connect them with the education and the reduction of harm issues that the children might have. So if anybody received a letter, Monet Watley, we have some questions we need to reach those parents specifically. In addition, we've got the Cleveland Food Bank outside talking about the nutrition issues to talk about healthier foods and increasing nutritional access for folks so that they can reduce their lead level. As Dr. Dearborn indicated, the better nutrition access you have, the more calcium, the more iron, the less lead your body will take in even if you're exposed to it. And so that's very important, especially with pregnant mothers or women who are expecting to get pregnant. We want to make sure that they get a lot of that information too. So in addition to the information you came for tonight, take some and share some with friends and family members. All of this issue, all these educational efforts, we want to get this out to as many folks as possible. We're doing another event like this tomorrow night at Michael Zone Recreation Center at 65th and Lorraine. So feel free to let folks know who might have wanted to come to this tonight but couldn't, that we are doing that again tomorrow. And then in the back, we'll be handing out cleaning kits. It's really important for the cleaning because dust gets everywhere. And you can't see it. It doesn't glow in the dark. It's not a certain color that you can see. Well, that's lead. If it's dirty and dusty, clean it. Especially if they're kids that are crawling around the floors. We want to make sure that their hands are washed before they eat and that the floors and the windowsills, any area that they can reach, is cleaned routinely. So feel free to take a cleaning kit, and there's information on all the tables, and there's food. So if you have any more general questions, feel free to ask them now. But if you have more like my house, my child questions, we want to do that privately on a one-on-one basis. Yes? Well, lead can still poison adults. It is just more, our brains are already developed. So we're not going to store it the same way, and it's not going to impair us as much unless you get really exposed. But you can have crafts or occupational exposures where adults do get poisoned, and the state of Ohio does track occupational exposures. So if somebody's working in automotive and tearing the cores out of batteries, that's lead. So they can bring that lead home from their occupational exposure, and kids can be poisoned off of their parents' clothing. No, adults should still be aware of it. If they're working in an industry or in a, well, it can still harm you if you get a very large dose. Okay, adults are a little more resilient. Our brains are kind of set. So what we have is what we have. But for women who are going to become pregnant, that's a real concern they need to be aware of. If there's lead in a chemical and it gets into your mouth, or you inhale fumes, so that's where soldering, there's fumes that come off that. So if somebody's doing a lot of soldering, they can get an exposure as an adult. It would have to have lead in it. Okay, there are other toxic fumes, and Dr. Dearborn is also an environmental scientist, so we talk about environmental exposures to chemicals, but tonight we're really focusing on lead poisoning prevention. Lead is a chemical, but it's not every chemical. Okay, so any other general questions? If not, all of our partners are happy to spend some time with you. Thank you for coming.